Hey guys, it's Scott Waldrop here, H&H Pro staff member. Ethan and I is out here in the garage today. I'm prepping for Crappie Masters Kentucky Club tournament in the morning, and we're going to go through some of the process that I do before tournaments. We're expecting some high winds tomorrow. I've got, for high wind days, I do drag a set of chains behind the boat, get it with the wind, throw them out. I've got 15 foot of chain, 2 pieces of it on 15-foot ropes that I do drag. It helps slow the boat down and control the boat. Any other prep for windy days, that's about all. If you don't have chains, you can use a windsock. Some ride preps. We're gonna go through some ride preps tonight, and I'm gonna show you what I do personally on a couple of rides, on how I rig them. I rig them all the same all through the day. Only thing we do is change jigs. My partner Greg's not here. He's on his way. So Ethan and I thought we'd get out here and make this short video. Okay, we're back. What I'm gonna do, first thing, get this rod over here and don't pull a Bill Dance and stick it in the ceiling fan. There we go. This is the War Pig I've been using for the last 2 or 3 days. The leader line on it is wore out, knots are weak, and for a tournament, I don't want that. So, this is my prep for tournament day. I'm using a 32nd ounce jig, and I will be fishing a little bit deeper water tomorrow, so I'm going to take this 1/4 ounce weight off and upgrade it to a half. Okay, what I'm going to start doing, I went to a black 1/2 ounce tungsten weight. We're going to be fishing a little bit deeper water in the morning. After that, and I am using canine braid. I think it's a 20 or 25 pound test braid. After that, I'm gonna thread me on a bead, an orange bead. And then from there, I'm gonna tie me on a swivel. Don't ask me the name of this knot. I think it's an improved clinch. It's one my dad taught me when I was a kid. Bring it up, loop it around, bring it back down, loop it about 6 times. And of course I dropped the loop.
So while you're tying that, Scott,
Yep.
What is the main, because I don't run a bead on my sinkers. What is your purpose for running that bead?
It keeps that knot, or it keeps that weight. Always wet your line before you cinch it. It keeps the weight from beating on your knot and destroying your knot. On braid, it's not as important, but on fluoro and on mono, if you're pushing or spider rigging, it's very important to have that bead between your weight and your swivel. And I use the smallest swivel I can find. I think that's like a number 7 or 8, if I remember right. I buy them at Walmart. And matter of fact, the beads, you can go back to Walmart sporting goods section and buy a pack, and they're about $2, $3. Or you can go over to Arts and Crafts and buy the same bead, a pack of 100 for about the same money. Just a little thrifty tip there. After I do that, I've got a piece of 6-pound mono. It's a Canine. Not sponsored by Canine, but I do use their product. They do support us as a team on H&H. And I use the same knot that I used previously. Bring it up, pinch them between your fingers, bring it back down, wrap it about 6 times, come back up through your loop, wet it, cinch it back down, fold it over. You don't have to be real crucial with your tag. You just want it about an 1/8 or a 1/16 off your swivel. Then I run about a 20, that's about 20-inch leader, what I run on all my rods. It seems to work the best.
So I know the age-old tale of wetting your line is so a fish in hot weather doesn't snap it because of with the fluoro. So what is that the same reason you do?
That's the same reason why I wet it. It keeps the friction down. If you pull it down tight on 6 pound or smaller, it creates a little friction, and it will fray that line just a little bit, and it will put a weak spot in it. And tomorrow I don't need no knots breaking. I'm using a red sickle. No, it's a red standard. Some I poured a month or so ago. It's a 32nd. Same knot. I use the same knot on everything. Bring it down, loop it, wrap it, run it back through, wet it, and cinch it.
So, you know, I know you've poured me, because I tie a few jigs, I know you've poured me sickles and regular hooks. Is there an advantage to sickles more than the regular as far as setting the hook and the strength?
I believe a sickle hook will create a better hook set on the fish. A lot of people's got their preferences between just a regular J hook or a sickle. I use both. Just so happens that's a regular hook. I do have a sickle, I think, on my Tsunami over here. But that's all I do on rod prep. I change out all my leaders, make sure there's no bad spots, hook them back up, wrap them up, lay them in the boat. For this tournament, we do have our outlaw net. I did load it because I've lost a couple fish the past week that I needed a net. When you're by yourself, it's hard to run a net on a big fish, and I prefer to boat flip a fish. But during the tournament, I'm not going to take a chance of losing that fish by boat flipping. So we will be using a Crappie Monster Outlaw net. When I'm prepping for a tournament, I make sure I get all my tackle, culling balls, everything set up. My culling balls are nothing special. I've taken actually 2 sets, made 1, but these are a necessity for tournaments. As you can tell, that's number 4. Our scales hold 8 weights. We weigh our fish, lock it in, put the corresponding culling ball on the fish, put it in live well. Once we get our 7, we start culling. And our scales will hold the weights. And let's just say I've got a 101 I need to cull, and I catch a 125. It's on number 4. I go back to the back of the boat, I pull number 4 out, double check it, make sure, and most of the time I double check with a balance beam I've got. I'll hang both fish on the balance beam, make sure my scales were right, which 90% of the time they are. Take the smallest one, throw it back, put number 4 culling ball on it, put it in live well, and continue through the day doing that. I was talking about a balance beam. This is my Ego balance beam. I've had it since about 2010 or 11. Hold it by the handle. As you can tell, it's got hooks on each side. Hang each fish on a hook, and the heaviest fish will go down, lightest fish will come up, and you take your lightest fish and throw it back. When you're fishing deep water, like I will be doing in the morning, 20 foot deeper, when you pull a fish out, especially when you're single poling, the fish will get what's called the bends. It's the same thing as a diver gets. He comes up, lungs filled full of air. In fish's case, it's their air bladder. There's two ways to fix that. Number one, you can take a needle, go underneath scale up above the fin, just above his belly, and stick it in that bladder, and you can bleed that air out. I don't like that. I have lost a few fish that way. I've tried going down through the throat with a straw to fizz them. Don't really like it. What I do, I've got a set of belly weights, and these come from Skipper's Jigs down in Florida. Clip them on the bottom fins, right on the pectoral fins. That will keep that fish upright in your live well, and eventually he will burp that air out. And that's what we want. We want them to burp that air out. If we don't, they'll end up dying. I had a 246 on Del Holla a few months ago. I come out 38 foot of water. When he come up, air bladder was coming out of his mouth. I shoved the air bladder back down his throat with my finger, put two of these 1/2 ounce belly weights on him. That fish lived all day long and was released to go spawn. So these are a true testament on belly weights. Tackle wise for tournaments, I go through my boxes the night before, and I start off with the colors that I've caught fish on this week, or that I think, considering water conditions, and yesterday, some of the bays I fished in were clear, some of them were dingy, and one bay I went in was nothing but pure mud. So general rule of thumb is clear water, clear baits. Murky water, darker bait. Muddy water, the darker the better. Now I've laid out some baits here I'm just going to show you that I'm going to start off with tomorrow. Crappie magnet right off the bat. That is a Show Enough. No, it's Glow Pop. I'm sorry. Turn it around here so you can see it maybe. It's chartreuse orange, pink and black. Is what it is. Made by Crappie Magnet. That's one of my go-to baits for in the morning. Another bait I'm gonna go to tomorrow, which is another one of my favorites. It's another Crappie Magnet bait. It's orange chartreuse. That's what I'm gonna fish if the water is murky. The Glow Pop I will fish in clear or murky water, but that I would definitely go to for murky to muddy water. Another go-to bait of mine is a Crappie Monster bait. This is a small fry in monster milk. It's strictly a clear water bait, and if I hit clear water tomorrow, which one bay I'm gonna fish on Barkley will be clear, it's spring fed, I will have those tied on. And another one I will go to is another small fry. It's a margarita. We'll showcase these just in a second. It's clear with a little bluish tint, pink tint to it also, and it shows up good in clear water. And the last bait I'm going to use is strictly for muddy water. Muddy water, you want to go to a little bit bigger profile and a darker bait. This is a Lake Fork lure. It's a bull brim pearl. Got pearl on the bottom, green on top. And for a muddy water bait, I like it. It shows up good, has a good profile. This is the original with the ball tail on it. It will be my go-to bait in muddy water. Rods, my selection of rods for in the morning will be the 16-foot Tsunami by H&H. I love this rod. And it is outfitted with the H&H bait caster. All of my dipping rods, I run a bait caster. They're easier to control, I think. It's personal preference, but I can one-hand control a bait caster while I'm fishing. And if you watch my videos, you'll see I switch hands constantly. I go right and left hand depending on where the fish is at, so I can move around. My next rod of choice will be the 13.5 foot Frank Hottasack War Pig, and it is paired with HH bait caster. I string all of my rods with braid. This is 20-pound K9 braid that's on them. If you get hung, most of the time you can straighten out a hook with it. Very seldom will you break your leader. If you got a weak spot, you will. The War Pig does come in a rear seat model with a reel seated back here. For me personally, I like the mid seat. I think you can control your reel when you need to let line out a little easier with a mid seat compared to a rear. But like I've said before, it's personal preference on what you like. I know Ethan likes his rear seat.
And the reason I like a rear seat is because you got a 13.5 foot rod. Well, to me, I like holding by my reel. I lose a foot by holding by the reel. If I hold my reel at the end, I get a full 13.5 foot.
Yeah, you do. He'll get about a foot over me when we're fishing together, and you can tell it on live scope. But that's why when my partner and I fish tomorrow, he'll be using a War Pig, I'll be using the Tsunami. It don't mean I'm gonna catch more fish than Greg. But if I miss a fish and it gets a little too close to the boat, he can dip to it and catch that fish if it's active. If it's not, we're gonna back off of it and we're gonna cast to it. If conditions call right and the fish won't hit a straight pole, I will pick up a casting rod and start casting. This one's got a 16th ounce on it. It's what I used yesterday, and I had to cast a few fish yesterday. But it's not your traditional casting rod. If you'll notice, that's actually a pushing rod. It's an 8-footer made by HH. It's the 8-foot pushing rod. But as Ethan said in our first video, because he uses one, they cast phenomenal. They are one of the best casting 8-foot rods I've had in my hand. And that's what I will use to cast with. Everybody has controversy in their own opinion on jig heads. Like I said, this is a 16th ounce, one I poured. And if you'll notice, it's not painted. Very seldom will I use a painted jig head, and if I do use one, it will be black. Matter of fact, that's got a number 4 sickle hook on it. And that's what I was casting yesterday. I caught a 158 on it. Honestly, if you ask me, colored jig head, I don't think you need it. A lot of people will use them. I just don't use a colored jig head. I use a plain lead head. Personally, I just don't like the colored jig head. My net of choice is the Outlaw net. It's got the rubber net on it, no tangle, no hassle. When you dip a fish, your jigs don't get hung in the net. And this is the spider rigging model. It does extend and extend and extend and extend to about 12 foot. And you do it right, anchor it with your elbow, you can hold it in one hand. And you don't have to worry about it bending or flexing with 2-pound fish, because I have netted several 2-pound fish with it. My fishing partner showed up. This is Greg Buckles, lives in right off of Green River Lake. We met through Kentucky Crappie Trail, fishing Jonathan's no-lin and Rough River tournaments, and become good friends. We decided this year we'd pair up together and fish our Crappie Masters Kentucky Club. With that being said, we do have two different styles of fishing. Most people know I love to single pole. Greg, what's your favorite?
I like casting on them.
He likes casting. He comes from Green River Lake. They cast a cork. But he does eliminate the cork when we're fishing together, and he will cast on a fish. Tomorrow, if the fish act like they did yesterday on the lake, I'll be running trolling motor and he'll be casting. With live scope nowadays, when you're fishing a team, a lot of times you got to sacrifice for one person to fish manage or run trolling motor. Our last tournament, he run trolling motor more than I did, and we end up? Sixth in that tournament. It took us a while to figure out the fish, but once we figured them out, what we needed to do, we caught them. I hope my fish are still there tomorrow and they don't get blown off the lake tonight. And we're good enough together, we can accommodate one another, and we know what works. If casting works, I'll gladly run trolling motor, or I'll gladly give it to him, and I'll stand back and hold this outlaw net and net his fish all day. If single poling's working, we're both adverse enough, we can both single pole and take turns with each fish. Greg, what's your thoughts, and what do you use for casting?
Okay. My thoughts on the casting part of it is sometimes you can get open water fish casting. Sometimes you can get the aggressive, bigger fish before you get up on the pile and spook them. And once you're approaching the pile anyways, you're looking at it from a distance before you can actually touch it with that long rod. So why not throw a jig over top of its head before you get up on it and give the chance for boat slap or anything like that to spook that fish into not wanting to bite. Also, it's handy on the front of the boat, both guys being able to run the trolling motor. I like to run it with my left foot, he runs it with his right foot, so there ain't no, he needs to fix his jig body back on his jig or whatever, or needs to retie, or I need to retie. There ain't no pause in that trolling motor. That boat is being controlled the full time. Most of the time we catch a fish. If you catch a fish, we mostly take our own fish back to the live well, so then you're up there fishing by yourself pretty much until the other guy gets back up and ready to go again. Scott's been doing all the pre-fishing down here because I live 3 hours away, and I don't have much luck on Kentucky and Barkley, but Scott lives down here and buses. But it would probably help if I didn't come down in a blizzard, a tornado, or 110-degree heat. I've not got to fish Kentucky Lake or Barkley, but the first time I come down here when it was somewhat comfortable and it was coming to monsoon that day. But I'll sit over on the right-hand side of the boat and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Greg brought up weather conditions. Tomorrow, we're looking at anywhere from 15 to 25 mile-an-hour winds. They have cut it back a little and tomorrow is April 1st. They have cut the forecast back some for the wind. It's going to be a west-southwest wind about dinner, and it's going to be a north-northwest wind after dinner. Well, yesterday when I went to Barkley, I set up for a north wind. Everything I looked at yesterday was for a north wind block. As I say block, I found stuff on the north bank. That way the north bank would block me from that wind. Those banks will be good tomorrow after dinner. But I read the forecast wrong and they've changed it a little. It's going to be south-southwest in the morning till about 11 o'clock. So Greg and I is going to have to scramble a little bit. I know two banks that we can hit, two spots we can hit that will have a south-southwest block. After that, we're going to have to scramble just a little to find some more places. That's the good thing about it being my home lake. I can prepare a little bit for that. I have been looking at maps, preparing for it and picking out places. If we need to run, it's going to be a rough ride to go anywhere. I haven't decided yet which boat ramp we're going to use. And like I told Christy this afternoon, I may ramp hop. I may go to one boat ramp, fish 2 hours, load up, go to another boat ramp, fish 2 hours, load up, and just ramp hop my way back to the weigh-in if I have to, if the main lake's that rough. But we'll make that judgment call in the morning.
So my weapon of choice tomorrow will be the H&H Storm Surge. It's got the 150 H&H spinner reel on it. and I've got, I believe it's a Suffix copolymer line, 6 pound test, what I'm running on it. They make, H&H makes a smaller reel, but the big one actually allows you to cast farther and makes where the line will come off a lot smoother. And H&H did on the storm surge, they've got I think they call it like a vortex eye or something like that.
Vortex, yeah.
It helps with tangling, helps for smoother casting, and it'll throw a 1/32 ounce jig. I was on Lake Cumberland last weekend throwing a 1/32 ounce jig and about 20-mile-an-hour wind, and it would definitely go a lot farther, and that's for sure. It did a lot better. And I was kind of unsure about the reel seat, but it's worked out good. Scott locked it down for me over on when we fished No Lynn, and that was a KCT tournament on No Lynn, and it's still there. You can tell where the wear marks are at on it.
Yeah, it is. I can tell you've used it quite a bit. It's got, the cork's got darker on it from the oil off your hands.
Another thing I like about casting is casting allows you to use a lighter rod, and this ain't but a 6 foot long rod, and it's a lot easier to hold this all day than it is to hold a long rod all day, especially in the wind. The wind's sitting there catching that rod, pulling it, and I don't know. I like this rod. I like to be able to catch them with this rod because it's easier on you and on your body. And he was kind of talking about earlier about utilizing the different size rods when wind was to catch you wrong, wind was to change direction or something like that. If that fish is right underneath the boat, and I've already got this in my hand where I was casting, I can drop down and get that fish that's under 10 foot. Where if you had a long rod in your hand, you have to drop this down and grab a short rod. I can just go, I've already got this in my hand, and I can get out there if the wind's right. I mean, you can get out there 50, 55 foot with this and put it on their head.
And the good thing about a short rod is you can pitch with them too.
Mm-hmm.
You can take them and actually pitch to that fish that's 8, 10 foot out. If he don't want it sitting still, you can pitch to him, swim that jig in front of him, and see if he'll react.
As far as on the cork fishing, if I go to a cork, I like a longer rod. I'd rather throw like an 8 foot, 7 to 8 foot rod on the cork. For one, when I throw a cork, I'm normally setting it anywhere from 3 to 5 foot deep, and it just gives you more room to adjust that float and throw a fixed float. I like a fixed float better than to a slip float. If you have to use a slip float to get the fish, I just assume eliminate the float. On the floater, as far as throwing a floater, sometimes fish in shallow water, you can throw that float over top of them a lot easier than you can maneuver the boat in there to them and not be stirring mud, and you can set off of them, 50, 60 foot from them and throw on them. Or just the actual movement of the bait underneath the floater might be what it takes to where it's hard to get that right size jig to keep that bait in the right water column, where with a floater, you can throw past that fish and ease that bait into the fish, and it's more natural and doesn't seem to spook them.
That's a wrap up today on boat prep, equipment prep, and a few commentaries on what we're going to do for the Mars tournament. It's getting late in the night. Greg and I's going to get in here and get ready to turn in for the night. Christy's waiting on us. For Ethan, Greg, myself, we'll see y'all later. As I say usually, we out of here.